Hi guys, it's Medica here. Today we're going to be working on this metallic rose DS Lite. As you can see here, it's been quite through a lot and it's quite filthy, but we're going to use our tools to the best of our abilities and some spare parts to make this thing work again. We'll have a trigger warning. There is some insect things involved in this video, unfortunately. It seems that we had some guests, uninvited guests, and I didn't quite notice them for quite a long time, so I'll try to post this timestamp below in case you want to skip that part. It's quite a long part, so you will miss a good chunk of the video. I wish I noticed the little guy sooner, but you'll find out. Either way, so I go about taking this DS apart, and here's our little friend.
Hello there.
Yeah, I wasn't too happy seeing him. If anything, it quite disturbed me, but I didn't notice until much later on. And, you know, we gotta have some guests too. Don't you hate it when you have some uninvited visitors? I know I do. Especially living ones. This DS was definitely quite filthy and needs some TLC. As you can see here, it has a bunch of dust bunnies in it, and it was really grossing me out. At the time, I didn't really have any gloves to work on this because I never needed them before. I've had some pretty gross DSs, but nothing to this level. I can deal with some dirt and grime, but not buggies. Buggies definitely give me the heebie-jeebies, especially that little worm guy that's marching around there. I apologize for that, but I promise you, he won't live to the end of the video. We are currently testing this DS, seeing if anything is really obvious about its functionality. There's nothing really I can notice besides that the triggers aren't working correctly. But I'm hoping with some elbow grease and maybe a little love that it will work as usual again, but only time can tell. So as I'm taking this guy apart, I definitely need to replace that screen. It's super scratched up and it's yellowed and it just isn't to my liking. The top screen is also not doing so well, but I'll get to that in a different moment. So I really wanted to make sure this board is clean because it was obviously filthy, and yet again, I don't really notice my little wormy friend there. I can be a bit oblivious sometimes, and this was definitely one of those moments, but also take in mind that the camera is pointed directly downward, and this worm is kind of out of sight, out of mind. I start scraping the bits and pieces. I really wanted to shake this guy off. Definitely, again, there was a lot of grime built up in between different layers of the solder and things like that. And I also accidentally wiped off the labels, but that's fine. Another thing I wanted to make sure was that the top screen was not functional because of the top screen, and not just because of the motherboard. I've had a few times where the motherboard was actually at fault and not the top screen, so I wanted to double check that for myself. Oftentimes when I test things, I tend to do this skeleton format, I guess I would call it. It's just I'm doing the bare minimum of, putting it together. Because it's a lot of work to put these guys together. It takes a lot of steps. So I just wanted to do it the easiest way as I possibly could have, and use a different motherboard to test that issue. But as you can see here, that top screen was definitely not functional. It actually got worse after I moved it around. So I went ahead and ripped the cable, so I knew for sure it was just not going to be my friend today. The next part is I'm going to fully disassemble this guy. At this moment, I think that the hinge is not working, but I come to the quick realization that it's actually not the hinge, and it's this little piece that's chipped, and that's actually what's making it not work. But I wanted to double check and make sure that it was just a piece and not something more complicated. If it ended up being this actual plastic hinge piece, it would have taken me more time, more parts that are kind of, more expensive and harder to find, and I honestly would prefer just reusing the same parts I already have. I was definitely having issues with doing the bare skeleton thing. Again, sometimes doing the shortcut way isn't always the right way, but it worked. The hinge was totally fine. So I picked a different DS to take stuff from, and that just had a good top screen but a bad hinge, so it seemed like a happy married couple. Another big problem I had was that the screens were not the same color. I didn't have any paint screens laying around, so I needed to switch frames over, and that is kind of a complicated process a little bit. It's definitely risky for sure, because you could risk damaging screens, but I'll get more into that in a second, and I'll show you exactly what I do. So I'm going to continue disassembling this guy and rip out the hinge and itself and slowly remove all these rubbers. Definitely takes a little bit. I'm trying to be careful not to damage the plastic more than it already has been damaged, because this guy's definitely seen some better days, and our wormy visitor is happy to join us on this venture, but I mean, I'm not too happy about him joining us, but that's just how it is. Luckily though, my camera is not high definition enough to show in full detail on what he looks like, and I'm not really going to describe in full detail what he looks like. I do zoom in a couple of times so you can see him a little bit better. I thought maybe poking some humor at the situation would make it more tolerable. I don't know. Let me know if this is absolutely disgusting that there was a worm. I mean, I know it was. I felt gross and icky recording this. But I swear, I didn't know. I don't normally allow insects in my domain. I did learn that it was like a carpet beetle larvae or something. I'm sorry to be talking about this. If you guys are totally not interested in this, I'm sorry. But I have lovely other videos I plan to upload which don't involve bugs, hopefully. Also bought a lot of DSs for the future so you guys can witness. So next part is I'm disassembling this bottom half layer. I really wanted to give this DS a deep wash because it was definitely needing some love, and I think a good wash would make it look good. And this is when I finally noticed our visitor friend, and I promptly found another one and decided to murder them. And I made sure that they would not harm us. And I wanted to make sure I would not find any more. So I'm going to definitely scrub the living crap out of this DS. So that maybe we won't find any more little bug friends. Either way, at this point on, I'm not going to be talking about it anymore. Out of sight, out of mind. It is in our memory. No more. I hope you guys enjoyed the little sounds I included in this portion of the video. I thought it would be soothing, kind of ASMR-y. Let me know if you enjoy it, and if you are enjoying the video so far, please let me know. Like and subscribe. Anything is helpful, and I really appreciate it. I typically use dish soap to wash my consoles because I find that it works the best, at least in my experience. And I use an old toothbrush that I use to clean it all and try to get into the little cracks and crevices. I definitely need a new one though. This one's seen better days, but I've also seen people use paintbrushes, like old paintbrushes, to clean their DSs, which I think is absolutely brilliant. And if you want to do that, go for it. I will say though, when you are washing these DSs, please make sure to remove all the metal bits, at least the most you can. There's a little metal bit I tend to leave in my DSs, but I've never had a problem with it rusting or having issues before, so that's up to you. But the major thing you need to remember is after you're done cleaning all these little bits and bobs, you need to let it air dry, and preferably on a towel of some sort. Because if you don't, and if you get even 1 ounce of water or one little drop of water that wants to go in one place or another, well, your DS will be fried, unfortunately. I actually had that happen where I was a little too greedy and decided that I wasn't going to really wait for it to dry. And I decided to air dry it, and with a air gun, and it didn't really work how I wanted to, and it ended up frying the board. Definitely, when it comes to fixing consoles, slow and steady wins the race, 110% of the time. I keep learning that every day, and I am very impatient. Now that I knew we had little buggy friends, I decided that I need to wear gloves on at this point. I found some from my mother, and I took them from her. She tends to dye things, so she always has gloves, and I decided, you know what, I'm not going to risk finding bugs in other DSs. Of course, I said I wouldn't talk about that anymore, so I won't. Either way, this DS was also pretty sad. The hinge was broken, it was pretty scratched up, and I was really only looking for this good top screen, supposedly anyway, and I was going to steal it for my pink one. When removing top screens from used consoles that have broken hinges, you can actually break this plastic bit, but usually I don't, simply because I've had it happen where I accidentally ripped into the wire when trying to rip off the plastic bit, and so it's really not worth it. And with enough practice, you get better at doing the loop-de-loop through this little hole thing. Of course, I had to take off my glove because that was just not working. The ribbon cable was a little bent, so I was worried about it, because oftentimes with any kind of bends or cuts or nicks or anything like that with the ribbons, they tend to not work correctly. But I was going to give it the benefit of the doubt, and try anyway to see if it was functional. So I got our new clean pieces, this was the next day, and I grabbed our new screen. Of course I had to replace the black bit, because that just wouldn't match our aesthetic now, would it? Pink and black? I don't know about that. I have made hybrid colors in the past with pink and black, but in my experience I typically prefer just to keep the same colors with the same colors. But that's okay. It's definitely fun mixing colors, but they don't really sell as well, unless it's black and white. Black and white is okay. Again, this video is sped up, but you also have to remember, I have a ton of experience doing this, and if you're watching this and trying to learn how to do it yourself, definitely take your time. There's lots of steps to it, and I have plenty other videos that go in more in depth on how complicated this is, or what you need to do it, and I suggest watching them, because in this video it's more casual, and definitely less instructional. I will say though, I did cut this bit out. I did have to clean that screen like 20 times. I had to use my air gun and keep trying to blow the dust off of it. It was quite painful. It was not behaving how I wanted it to. And neither was this top panel for some reason. I couldn't figure out why, but it was just being such a pain. And sometimes it just is that way. It could be that the part is misplaced or not sitting correctly, or it could just be that the DS gods said no, and they want to ruin your day. And that is part of the process. I will say one of my bigger advice is, if you're tired, just don't work on consoles. Typically when I'm tired, I tend to make mistakes. Here's an example of me making mistakes, but we'll get into that in a second. So whenever I remove the frames off of these screens, I heat them up in my soldering air station. I typically heat it at about 110 degrees Celsius, I think, and I use an X-Acto knife. Please be careful. I've cut myself so many times doing this, and it's so easy to slip this knife. On top of that, you need to be really slow and gentle the entire way. I'm still not good at this. I struggle and mess up all the time. It's very difficult to do. You need to separate and pry the different layers off from each other. And the thing is, if you use this frame and pull too hard against the touchscreen, it could ruin the touchscreen. And obviously that is not our goal. The only reason I'm going slow and steady is because I want to preserve the frame, and it's easy to bend it and ruin it. And I actually end up doing that in a second here. When you remove frames, it is definitely slow and steady wins the race. I can't emphasize that enough. It's very tedious, it's very easy to make a wrong move, and it's sped up, but you need to keep that in mind. If you do not, well, it's going to not be pleasant for anyone involved. It's at this moment I realize I accidentally bent the frame, and unfortunately when you do that, it's basically game over. You kind of just have to get a new frame. But I continued anyway to see if I could save it, and also it was good practice for me. I am still not 100% great at removing frames from DS Lites, but if you guys have any suggestions on how to make this process smoother, then let me know. This is a way I self-taught myself, because I couldn't find really any videos out there, or much at all, to help me figure out how to take off these frames, besides a few articles, but they were kind of vague, and I wanted some instructional help. I tend to learn better with videos, but I don't know about you guys. I am kind of like, I need the visual, or else I don't really understand what's going on. Now I'm repeating that process again, this time at 16 times speed, and without failing. This is what it would look like if you are successful, and being a little more patient on how this goes. Take note, this whole process in general I think took me about 2 hours for both screens, so that's how long this process takes, especially when you're paranoid like me and worried you're going to break it. After that, it started to finish assembling this guy and make sure everything is working correctly, as much as it could be, I guess, but there's always something up a DS's sleeve. And this DS, which I lovely nicknamed the DS from Hell, you'll find out why, because of how many problems I've had. The fact that there was mysterious visitors coming from it earlier was an entirely new experience for me. I've never had that happen before, and I had other issues, but I was a little stubborn. For instance, I thought maybe if I just, clean these triggers, they would work. I kind of hoped. I don't know why I hoped so much, but I was like, you know what? Let's give it a shot. Give him a chance. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. When it comes to these membranes, I really suggest that you clean them very well. You never can over clean, but you can always under clean. So why not do the over cleaning? And make sure you clean the black bits. I learned this the hard way. Those are very important in making sure that the buttons work correctly. Also, always check the membranes to see if they're cracked or ripped, because they don't work if they are that way. I wanted to finish assembling this guy, and I wanted to put the touchscreen in, or the new screen in as is. And when you're replacing the frames, you don't really need the frame on yet, because your actual housing will be your guide, and you'll see that in just a second here. But it's quite helpful. Housing is quite helpful guide, but I was struggling with this wire here. Sometimes it takes a moment. I've one time had a wire stuck in there for an hour and had to dig it out. It was not fun. But it definitely sometimes can take moments. So be patient. Let it cook. It will happen eventually. And then I began to reassemble this back housing here, putting all the pieces back. Make sure you don't forget this. The amount of times I have forgotten to put the pieces back is I could have saved so much money and time by doing that. And then you want to put your little triggers in. Little triggers are tricky at times and can be annoying because it's a literal spring, and springs do spring things. As you can see here, they're doing spring things. That's okay. I still managed to tuck them in, get them nice and cozy before I started fully assembling this back housing piece, making sure all the little bits and bobs are in place. But hey, we're almost done. At least I think so, right? Right? One can hope. I also don't typically put all the screws in when I'm testing, but there's a reason for that. And here we go. I put the little frame in. It's pretty easy putting the frame in, you just want to make sure there's no lumps or clumps underneath. But as you can see here, this dent is bothering me. I spent an hour trying to fix it. Nothing I did worked. And I was humbly disappointed. And not only that, the triggers weren't working at all. So I had to fix that, and that required soldering job, which meant I needed to take the whole thing apart again. And I wasn't too happy about that. I knew I should have just replaced them anyway, but I really don't like wasting parts. I don't know about you guys, but I try my hardest to preserve as much parts as possible, because otherwise I feel so wasteful. I feel like I'm hurting the environment more. Sometimes I'll see YouTubers out there that fix consoles and it looks amazing, or even buy broken things and just talk about them. And they end up throwing away so many parts that I think have so much life left in them. Yeah, maybe I'll have a scratch or dent here and there, but that's okay. I think that's fine. DSs are not meant to be perfect. I mean, these consoles are like, what, over 10 years old? Either way, I tried putting new triggers on, and it took me a while. I have been struggling trying to get these new solder tips I have to work, and no matter what I do, they don't work. I can't get them to work at all. And I don't know if it's my soldering iron or the tips are just not compatible. But every time I have to switch to my bigger tip, and I don't know why. If any of you have suggestions on how to fix that, please leave a comment below or ask me questions about it. I would greatly appreciate it. You know, I figured it out regardless and made sure that it at least somewhat got on until I eventually switched to my usual iron tip. But make sure that every time you do solder that you clean it off very thoroughly. My flux isn't very good, so it sticks on way too well. It's very hard to get off. I try my best. And the worst part is I melt the Wi-Fi connector a little bit. I don't know if you saw that, but I totally did, and I was so mad at myself, but I knew it'd probably be fine. But I was definitely not pleased with melting that little connector. I should have been more careful, but I was really struggling with that soldering tip. Either way, I'm lining up this new guy, making sure it sits snugly. So something I've learned ever since I started doing triggers, which, you know, I haven't learned triggers that long, is that you must be on track. Like, you must be within the box, and your trigger needs to be exactly in line. It can be very microscopically off, but it needs to be very within the box and in a certain position and straight and within the lines. You want to color in the lines per se, or else it just won't work right, and then you have to start over because it won't fit in the housing correctly and it won't click. And that doesn't really fix your issue, now does it? I'm planning on later on to make a new trigger repair video and show you how to do it better, since the knowledge I've learned from that, and kind of show you how that works. Another thing is I was definitely struggling with putting in this connector in. Sometimes they're really annoying and like to move around a lot. I don't know why. Some of them are easy and some of them are annoying, some of them are less annoying. It's just how it is. And again, I put all the wires back where they belong, and we're trying again, because now everything has to work right. I don't know. We'll find out. So I want to partially assemble this with good reason, and we're going to test it, because hopefully the triggers work now. And they do work, which is a Christmas miracle. But what is happening here? The games won't eject. And you might thinking, Medica, you should have tested this beforehand. And you are 110% right. I should have. But I tend to test things, forget to label them, and then I lose track of what I've tested and what I haven't tested. And unfortunately, this is one of those moments. I tried to clean out the game cartridge. I had no clue how to fix this issue, so I grabbed a donor board in hopes that I could figure it out. But I really couldn't. I was really struggling and just decided, you know what, somebody will love it anyway, despite its flaws. So, it's okay if it doesn't eject games, as long as you can take it out. It doesn't really matter, right? So, here it is, the beautiful specimen, and I'll leave a comparison here. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and for all the support. I really try to bet my best with these videos. I am still learning, and I hope you're understanding of that. I'm sorry about our little visitor in the beginning, but otherwise I would love it if you could leave me a like, a comment, and possibly subscribe. It would mean the world to me. Thank you, and peace.